Great. I think you can all see that now. Welcome. We're really excited you're here. We're going to dig into time management and strategic planning today. So we're going to take it way past to-do lists, and we're going to give you some actionable tools and skills to actually help you get to those annual goals that maybe you've not been so successful in finishing in past years. So here we go. This is an interactive workshop, and I've prepared some worksheets for you. They are totally optional. I find that kind of thing helpful, and I really like having a tangible takeaway from workshops. So I'm a big fan of the worksheets. If you would like to use them, there are two options. There's a PDF that you can print and fill out. That's linked in the session. If you click on the session in the main lobby, get into the session details and kind of scroll to the bottom, there's a download of a PDF. Or Ashley is also putting a link in the chat right now for Google Doc. That's more of a form that you can fill in and actually enter your numbers digitally, and then maybe print that out after you've made your entries if you'd like, or just save it on your computer if you would prefer a digital copy. Whatever you choose to do, you can use these tools or not, but they are available for you. I think a great advantage of using worksheets is that it really helps to cement these ideas and kind of commit yourself to them. So it's kind of a useful exercise. I encourage you to think about it. And when we talk about time management and goal setting, this is such the perfect time for it, right? Not only is it January, but you're doing this really great online conference, hopefully getting a lot of inspiration and good ideas and learning some new things, right? So this is the perfect time for a strategic planning exercise. And this is what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk a little bit about some time management concepts. Just to let you know, like, you're not alone if this is hard for you. I want you to understand why this is a totally new skill set, and it's something that you can learn and get better at. We're going to take a look at your own personal productivity analysis and really identify when you're most productive in the day and the week. And then we're going to break this down in the worksheets, and we're going to start planning out your year, your months, and your weeks. So you walk away from this workshop feeling like you have a game plan for the year ahead. We're also going to talk a little bit about regaining control at the end. So when you get to June and you're like, gosh, I took that workshop, I felt like so in charge, like a boss lady, and now I can't get my shit together again. This is terrible. We're going to help you look at ways to get back on your game and get back on top of things with these tools. So keep them. You will come back to them later in the year, and they'll help you, I promise. All right. So some things I want to share before we dig into the worksheets. Small business owners, you need a whole different kind of time management skill set. When you maybe had other jobs in the past where you had another manager you reported to, or you were working on a staff or a team, you didn't have to do as much of this. You know, oftentimes in different jobs, we get assignments and we execute them. We don't have to kind of figure out what the assignments are as much. We don't have to set the long-term goals for a company for the entire year. You know, someone else takes care of those things, and we don't have to worry about it. So for a lot of small business owners, this is a new way of thinking. This is something you may not have done in the past, and setting these higher level strategic goals and then making time to actually get to them and work on them is really tough to do when it's new. So we're going to talk about how you break this down and set a game plan, right? We also want to make sure that you think about time as a resource in a whole different way. And just reassurance, you're not alone. This is a skill just like anything else. It's just like a studio skill. You can learn this, you can practice it, and you can get better at it. So don't say, oh, I've always been terrible at time management, because you know what? You're starting fresh today. You're going to learn some new skills, and hopefully, you know, in the months ahead, you're going to say, hey, I'm getting the hang of this. I'm getting better at this. I'm getting pretty good at time management. I can do it. And you can all do this. I promise you. So the first thing we really want to emphasize is that time is a resource. It's almost just like the silver in your studio and the materials at your bench. It's finite. It's something you only have a certain amount of, and you have to use it carefully. You have to kind of decide when you want to use it and when you want to save it, and how you want to use it in the best possible way, right? None of us are going to waste silver and just throw it in the trash can. And your time is the same sort of thing. So when we talk about time management, it's important to start thinking about prioritizing the things that are important to use your time on, and then maybe setting some other things aside. And also using some techniques like discipline to just make sure that you're using it as a resource in the most effective way. So I want to give a shout out to Kelly. I hope you all caught her session yesterday because it was really, really great. It's a perfect companion to this particular presentation. Kelly talked about communication skills and etiquette and setting expectations with your customers. So we're not going to talk too much about that, but it really dovetails nicely with a lot of the strategies we're going to discuss today. So it's important to set expectations. It's going to help you manage your time better. So these two sessions really go well together. If you missed her presentation yesterday, you can watch the recording by going to that sessions link at the top of the lobby, and then looking for the watch recording button on that entry in the Zoom event. All right, so your time is limited, right? We all know that, and I'm sure you've all felt that already if you've been doing your jewelry business for a while. It's very stressful sometimes and overwhelming, right? So you have to understand that as the leader, even of a one-person business, there are more demands on your time. And so we're going to have to get better at setting deadlines for things, setting clear expectations, using habits and plans to kind of use that time as a resource. So again, backing up to just some general concepts to help you all understand why this is so hard, I want to talk a little bit about something called decision fatigue. And this really starts to kind of hit home for a lot of people who run small businesses, right? So the average person makes a lot of decisions each day, but business owners have to make even more. And these decisions feel more intense because they often test the limits of, the skills and knowledge that you may have yourself. So you're constantly challenging yourself and learning new things. And you're also having to set the direction, set the schedule, all of those things we talked about earlier, right? You're the one leading the charge and directing the ship. All of that takes a lot of brain power. And it's not just in your head, it's actually a physical thing. They study this, in psychiatry, it is scientifically proven, like decision fatigue is real. And when your brain gets tired, it stops performing well. You stop being productive, you start making really bad decisions, and you start doing these really stupid things. And I think you've probably all been there when you're like, oh my gosh, I have a pile of orders, I have things to do, I haven't done this, I haven't done that, but right now I really just want to polish my old stock. Sorry. This is what happens when you kind of check out. You get so overwhelmed that you start procrastinating and just doing silly things like cleaning your workbench, right? I am certainly guilty of this kind of thing. And I think probably some of you are too. This is what happens when we get overwhelmed. And another really solid example of this is like when we go to the grocery store, and I've done this a million times, right? So I need salad dressing on my shopping list. I walk down the aisle and I say, ooh, I think I'll try something new this week. And I look at this shelf of like 500 salad dressings and I just go, ah. And then I eventually walk away and say, no salad this week, forget it. We're just gonna skip the salad. I don't even want to deal with this. Or I'll just grab the one thing I've had a million times and forget about trying something new because it's just too much. Like if my brain is tired and I'm going to the grocery store after work, I'm done. I'm not gonna do this. So there are ways to kind of overcome that, right? And we're going to talk about it. One of the ways is to kind of narrow your focus, right? And this is where branding helps us. Sometimes we just kind of focus on a brand that we've used and we trust, or we'll just narrow down on okay, I'm just going to go with Italian dressing and I'll just look at each of the Italian dressings and that's it, right? So this is a way to kind of limit that feeling of being overwhelmed. So if you did print out the worksheets or you're doing this digitally, right now I want you to take a look at the time habit self-assessment one. So it's right here. If you don't have it, that's okay. You can just take some quick notes or think about this. But I really want you to think about what time of day you feel most on your game, right? When you feel really alert and fresh, when you're able to do your best work and be most productive. Is that first thing in the morning? Is that 10 o'clock at night after everyone else in the house is in bed and out of your way? When is like your sweet spot in the daily schedule? I also want you to think about when you're interrupted the most frequently. So sometimes even when it's our productivity sweet spot, it's just when everybody's in and out the door, you're getting all the phone calls, maybe your kids are running in and out, they need help with homework or other things are going on. When are your interruption windows? Think about that too. And now that we've just talked a little bit about decision fatigue, think about when you experience that, like if you start to feel it late in the day, late in the week, at certain times, like during the month, if you have a lot of deadlines at a certain time of the month, that kind of thing, like when are you feeling this? And then some other just self-assessment ideas in terms of what you procrastinate and what deadlines are most difficult for you to meet. So I want you to kind of give yourself a little honest report card on these kinds of things. Like, let's identify where the high points are and where the low points are in using your time as a resource. Another thing to do is to kind of plan ahead. So while you guys are working on this, I'm going to keep talking. And that's just when you put something really specific on your list, right? And you're like, I'm not even thinking about trying something new today. I'm just going to get the one salad dressing and move on, right? I don't have time to dig into that today. So setting a specific plan with a focus is helpful when you're feeling overwhelmed too. It's not always as simple as salad dressing, right? But it's a good example to kind of drive home the way it works. The other time I used to always experience this is I would get a phone call from my husband, like all the time at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, the very end of the workday. And he'd be like, hey, we made no plan. What do you want for dinner? And I would always pop back and be like so tired. And I'd be like, I don't have time for that. You know, it's just when you start to shut down and feel that decision fatigue. I think that's the first thing that rolls off your tongue. And maybe that's something that you have all experienced too, is when your impulse is to just be like, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. I can't deal with that right now, right? And what we're really saying is I'm out of mental energy. I've spent it. I've done all of the heavy lifting I can do today or this week. I can't make one more decision, even if it's a teeny tiny decision and it's a really small thing. And that's totally human. That's totally normal. We all feel that way. So what we want to do is make sure that we're putting tasks forward in our sweet spot time zones. And we're leaving kind of like our easy autopilot tasks for the times when we really feel this decision fatigue the most. One of the things that really causes decision fatigue, maybe more than anything, is planning out what to do and when to do it. So if every day you're walking into your studio and you're like, okay, it's Wednesday, what am I going to do today? A lot of times you're wasting your very best mental energy just deciding what you're going to do for the day, because that's the first thing when you walk in the door. And this is where the power of habits and routines and plans can really, really help you, right? So if you have plotted out kind of a weekly rhythm where Mondays I'm going to do this, Tuesdays I'm going to do this, Wednesdays I'm going to do this, you walk into the studio first thing in the morning, you have your plan like posted on the wall, you don't have to think about it, you just look at it and say, Monday morning, my first thing is I'm going to pay my bills, I'm going to do some admin time, and then I'm going to be at the bench by 10 o'clock. Boom, it's done, no energy required. Because hopefully you created that plan and that routine in a moment when you did have the time and mental energy to put into it. So we're going to set some time in your schedules to do that right now. Okay, so how do we go about this, right? Like, how do you set a schedule? It's easy to think about setting a daily schedule or a weekly schedule, but what we end up doing is we fill it with all of these things, and then we find 3 months from now that we haven't gone to any of the projects that we got excited about at JBF, right? They just all kind of slipped away as we kind of got into the daily grind. Okay, so we're gonna like really back it up to big picture, and we're gonna start looking at this at a higher level. And we're gonna start at the annual level, look at our annual calendar, and then we're gonna kind of bring it down to those smaller time zones, right? Monthly, weekly, daily. Okay, so the first thing we wanna do is look at our annual plan. So this is another worksheet in your toolkit, right? That you have on Google Docs or in the PDF. If you want to get it later, that's fine. You can just take notes for now. But this is the annual goals and planning worksheet. And it's really just a list of months, right? So if you're taking notes, you can just write down January through December, leave yourself some space on each one, right? And go ahead and get started on that. We're going to talk about this in the next several slides, right? But we're also going to be talking about strategic planning as part of this process. So setting goals for your business is really what helps you to move forward and grow and develop, right? So it's not just like sitting and doing the tasks in front of you for each day. You're going to have to kind of set out a little bit of a journey, a little bit of a plan that takes you further down the road. One of my best tips for setting and achieving goals is to not only write them down, but to hang them up, like right in front of your workbench. I even hang my annual goals a lot of times right here underneath my monitor. It's like taped right here. So it is front and center all the time. And so I can kind of keep looking back at it and keep myself accountable and on track. And it's also just a reminder like, okay, yeah, I have to set time chunks for this periodically to kind of work on these things and make sure that they stay in motion. So after this week, you should probably identify like 3 to 5 major goals for your business. What's going to help you grow? What's going to help you in your career? What's going to help you become a better jeweler, right? And increase your skills. And you're going to want to set aside some time, at least one day of each month. Now, it is not realistic to work on your high-level goals every day. Nobody can do that, right? And sometimes you can chip away at them on a weekly basis, but usually these are the things that are more difficult, that strain you and maybe require some extra research or mentoring, or watching an online webinar, something like that, to kind of help you reach your bigger goals, right? So these are things that are best worked on in longer time blocks when you have that mental energy and you can really sit down and say, I'm going to dig in for like this entire afternoon, and I'm going to work on 1 or 2 of these larger goals that I set for myself. So think about if that's the beginning of the month or the end of the month for you, like what makes sense in your like monthly business rhythm in terms of a window that you have open, right? And you're probably not going to work on your annual goals in like November and December in the height of the busy season. But the other like 9 to 10 months of the year, you should be able to put some solid chunks of time into your annual goals at these regular intervals. Another tip I want to give you on strategic planning is to connect with small business development centers and SCORE advisors in your state. So Ashley's going to drop those links into the chat. These are tremendous resources that are almost entirely free. They're funded by federal dollars through the Small Business Administration in the United States. So if you are in the US, you can access SBDC and SCORE services for free in your state. So get on those links, identify where your closest offices are, subscribe to their email list, and maybe set up a consult. These organizations will connect you with a business mentor, and they will sit down and do individual personalized advising sessions with you. So if you want help setting your goals, they'll help you with that. If you want help achieving your goals and staying on track, they'll help you with that. If you're writing a business plan, they are trained to help you write a business plan. This is what they do. It's one of the best resources out there, and so many people in the field just don't even know about these organizations. So I really try and promote them and share that resource with all of you in JBF. All right, so as we kind of come back to this annual worksheet, thinking about our year, one of the things that is really true of retail, but especially in jewelry, is that we very much have these annual rhythms, right? There are very strong seasons in jewelry buying. And you also kind of have the ramp up to those seasons and the come down after each one, right? A lot of jewelry artists also do shows and events, right? So it could be craft shows, it could be wholesale shows, but those events are kind of like these major markers on your annual calendar. So go ahead and fill those things in right now, even if you don't know the exact days. You know, Cherry Creek happens around the same week every year. Craft Boston happens around the same week every year. Like these major shows that jewelers participate in, they are in these like kind of fixed time slots. So once you have your big events on your annual calendar, think about when you need to purchase supplies for those and when you need to build up inventory for those shows. So in the month prior to your shows, you should kind of be writing down like inventory buildup, and then maybe anything else you need to do, like warming up your leads list. That's something that Amy and Robin talked a lot about in their session, and making the most of shows. Doing that pre-marketing for your show should happen in the month before the show. And then in the month after the show, you have follow-up work to do, right? Looking at who signed up for your email list, reaching out to them, saying, you know, here's some new items, or I haven't heard from you. Can I set up a Zoom call so we can look at the line together again? And doing those additional steps both before and after. Now, if you have these regular rocks in your annual schedule, I encourage you to transfer a lot of things we talk about today off of your paper copy and onto your calendar app, right? Whatever it is you use on your phone or your PC, pretty much any calendar app nowadays has the recurrence function. So if you enter Craft Boston as a show you do every year, just go ahead and select that recurrence option to make sure that it shows up on your calendar, not only for 2023, but for every year, forever, you know, if you want to. And that way it's done. You don't have to think about it. It's going to be there when you look at your calendar in years ahead, and you won't lose track of it and kind of get surprised and you know, stressed as it kind of blindsides you in the years when things get a little bit more busy. All right, there we go. Did that skip a slide? Sorry, I just want to make sure. There we go. Okay, so we're going to stick with the very same worksheet because the annual plan also has individual months on it, right? So the next thing I want you guys to think about is, you know, anything that may happen on like a monthly or a quarterly basis, right? If you work for a bookkeeper, for example, they want you to submit maybe some sales reports and receipts either every month or every quarter instead of just all at once at the end of the year, right? So those are like deadlines for yourself and your small business that you can kind of put again in that annual calendar because you have this recurring rhythm. And again, you're going to want to add those deadlines as recurring reminders on your calendar app as well. And these are some other things to think about that you don't have to do every day, right? I mean, you don't have to take jewelry photographs every day. You can kind of block those things up or accumulate them and then spend an afternoon taking all of your photos and editing them kind of all at the same time when you're in that mental zone, using all those cool things that Janelle taught you all earlier in JBF. Some of the other things that hit you a little less frequently are like managing your product listings on your website, paying your bills, ordering your supplies, and checking your inventory. And then maybe you have some monthly appointments that you just need to make sure are slotted in there too. So this is a place where to-do lists can be really helpful. Like that's such a small tool. We use that in our personal lives a lot, but it can be really helpful to just save on your computer, like my end of month checklist. You know, these are the things I want to make sure I kind of get to at the end of each month. And maybe I block out a day at the end of each month to kind of just do some housekeeping on some of these things, right? Pay the bills, update my product listings, remove items that are out of stock from the website, clean up the studio, order supplies, you know, all these kind of things. You know, how can you chunk those into a single checklist that you can just move through, boom, 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 not have to think about it, not have to use all of that mental energy to plan out what do I do next, but just have a checklist that you refer to and maybe you pull it up on your computer on the 25th of each month and you just boom, 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 get those things done. knock them out all at once, right? So some tasks are a little more time consuming. You can't block them up like that on a single checklist day. But others, there's just all these little pesky things. And a lot of times that's the stuff that we're most likely to forget, right? Because you don't do it every day or every week. It only hits you once a month, and it can really slip through the cracks pretty easily. All right. So monthly planning, we've talked about adding in your appointments, your monthly tasks, and we're also going to talk about these goals and clusters. All right. So now that you've got some of these annual and monthly rhythm, monthly cycle things on your calendar, look at where you've got some gaps, right? Maybe you don't have any shows in March, and that's a really great month to set aside some time to work on your goals. So maybe, in a few months of the year, you only have a little bit of time, so you can set aside an afternoon or a day, put those things on your calendar now, and then maybe you really set like a retreat for yourself when you have some more time to dedicate, and you set aside like a whole week in March and just say, this is my project week. I'm gonna kind of put an out of office notice on my store, set the expectation that my lead times are gonna be a little bit longer for anybody that might reach out. And I'm going to allow myself to kind of focus on some of these projects and larger goals that I want to get to. So now that you can kind of see those gaps in your calendar, make some notes and put those things down in ink right now as kind of a commitment to set aside the time. All right. And we're going to look at other ways to kind of cluster in these next few slides. So don't worry, we're still going to talk about clustering some more. Okay. But we're moving down, right? So we started looking annually. We've been talking about monthly, and now we're moving into weekly. Okay, so there is a tool, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on this routine task list, but it is one of the worksheets. And this is just the stuff that you do on a really regular basis, right? So on a really regular basis, you're maybe making production work to fill orders and stock your website. Maybe you're making some one-of-a-kinds that are on a regular basis, doing your marketing, your social media posts, answering emails, all those kinds of things. And your personal routine tasks come into play here too, right? You're a small business, you're a human, and your time is a resource, right? It's finite. And so your personal commitments definitely come into play in terms of demands on your time as well. So it's totally appropriate to kind of blend those things together on your calendar and keep them combined, right? So other errands and appointments, things that you have in your regular weekly and daily life. Okay, so I know you probably don't have a lot of time to brainstorm that right now. You can jot down like a few of the most common things, but when you circle back to this, I want you to really look at kind of grouping things on your routine task list, right? So task switching is really stressful for your brain. So it's very difficult to go like back and forth from bench time to customer service to marketing. And then I got to do something for the bookkeeper. Now I got to go get my kids from school. And then I got to come back and finish this job at the bench. That is really, really difficult when you're constantly switching gears. So what's nice is when you can identify these blocks of tasks and set aside time to like get into the mind zone, right? So maybe you spend time daily on social media posts, but some of these other tasks that are marketing related, you do less often. Like maybe you do them weekly or monthly. But what you can do is you can create a time block where you say, every Tuesday and every Thursday, I'm going to set aside a few hours where I'm going to work on marketing tasks, right? Things in this cluster. And then you can have a list of what those marketing tasks are that you refer to. So again, you can actually make a checklist of the things like this that we've shown here on this slide that you need to attend to in your marketing responsibilities, right? So it's less stressful to switch from social media and website product listings, things that are in that kind of same general space, than to move back and forth between tasks and topics that are totally different, right? So this allows you to kind of get into marketing mode and be as productive as possible. So you'll probably list out your routine tasks and you'll see some places where things group. Other things are not going to group nearly as smoothly, right? But some places that commonly group for people in jewelry businesses are like customer service and admin work, like those bookkeeping tasks, answering the emails, answering customer inquiries, all of that customer service back and forth that you have to do. Setting aside a little bit of time, like as a block, to do all of that at once, instead of like answering every single notification that pops up on your phone, right? So it's important to kind of use discipline and tune out those distractions. I actually turn off all notifications on my phone, so it is never beeping and bonging at me. And this way, when I get into that time of day, when I've set aside to answering emails, answering requests, all that kind of stuff, I do it all at once. I knock it out, and then it's not constantly distracting me from other things I'm trying to get done in the day. And that can be a really valuable time-saving tool to just turn off those notifications and be able to address it all in a single time block, right? But we also want to think about when our most productive time is. So earlier we talked about wasting some of your best brain hours on just like setting the schedule for the day. I think a lot of this kind of stuff we're talking about, these customer service emails back and forth, that doesn't require the most mental energy for most people, right? Like usually those are really routine questions, you know, is this available? What's the price on this? What's custom work look like? Can you send me your custom work agreement or process? You know, all of that is very routine tasks that probably isn't going to test your brain quite so much. So that's a block of time that you can put maybe at the end of the day when you're less fresh, less creative and productive, and just get it done then, and save your best mental energy hours for the things that are more taxing and intense for you mentally. All right, so now we're going to take a little mental break, because I know when you're learning something new, I mean, this is why I think attending conferences, it really brings you out sometimes. It's exhausting to learn new things, and it's because of what we've been talking about. It's decision fatigue. It's when your brain is just like consuming so much new information, like it really does test you. So that's normal. It's okay. I know we're throwing a lot at you, but that's why we're trying to leave you with tools and recordings so you can kind of come back to this when your brain starts to shut down. So try and stick with me if you can, though. You guys are doing great. I'm glad to see like the thumbs up. You're still with me. You're hanging in there. Good job. We are more than halfway done. We're like 3/4 of the way done, and we'll have some time for questions at the end. Okay. All right. So we want to come back to that self-assessment you did at the beginning. Think about when you're most productive in the day. And that's when you want to put your bigger projects, your work on goals, your work that is mentally more draining, right? The things that take the time, right? The accounting, the stuff for the bookkeeper, like, it stinks, but it's got to get done, and it's got to get done right. When you're least productive, when you're feeling that decision fatigue in your life, right? That's where you put those routine, easy tasks, answering emails, being on social media, you know, just the stuff that you can kind of do on autopilot, polishing stock, doing your finishing, all that kind of stuff, right? Put that in your less productive times. Don't waste your quality brain hours on that stuff. Also keep in mind when you're most likely to be interrupted. For some people, this is a major factor. So even though you might be most productive during a time slot, if someone is coming to your door or ringing on your phone like every 10 minutes, you can't get anything done. So it may be best to just leave that time block for the routine autopilot tasks we were talking about, just because you got to surrender to that sometimes if it's beyond your control. Okay. So the last worksheet in the toolkit, and this is super easy to sketch out on a piece of paper too, if you like, it's this weekly game plan, right? So this is really where the rubber meets the road, okay? We're gonna try and like plan out a week and see if you all can stick to it for the next month or so ahead. So be careful here. Like you don't want to get so granular that you're like scheduling yourself down to like 20-minute increments, right? That's too much. So try and like do this maybe in hours or 2-hour time blocks, so that it's a little bit more manageable. And you can kind of slot some things in based on what we've talked about, right? Like bench time, like when is the time you really want to be at the bench? That's the first thing to fill in for most jewelers. Like, when those bench hours need to be. Look at where your gaps are and put in some of these other like daily tasks, especially like if it's a really good idea to just dedicate a little time block to social media every day, because doing it on a routine basis is so important, right? So put in those social media time blocks here and there. And then what I want you to do right now, this is maybe one of the most important things of this entire workshop. So big like fireworks here is on your Friday at the end of the day, put a time slot for planning the week after, right? You're going to do this sometime on the end of each week to plot out the week ahead now, so that when you walk into your studio on Monday, you just start cooking right away. Okay, so getting in the habit of this planning time block is really important. And once you have like your general weekly plan in place, it's just a matter of bringing it up and then like making some tweaks. I've got a doctor's appointment this week on Tuesday, and I'm going to so-and-so soccer game on Thursday afternoon. Those are things that I have to adjust for next week. But otherwise, I'm mostly going to stick to my weekly plan and just kind of make a few little updates. So this doesn't even take long. This isn't an hour-long thing. This is probably going to become like 10 minutes that you just make sure you do. And you've probably been doing this your whole life in some way, but when you do it in combination with like these tools, it helps you stay more disciplined and accountable for your time management. So setting this up, it takes a lot of time right now, right in January, when we're doing like this workshop or this week of JBF to kind of plot out the course. But then you have these things and you can just kind of circle back to them, take a look, and be on your way. Okay, then we want to like add in those time blocks we were talking about, those clusters of tasks. So we really talked about the example of the marketing block, right? So your marketing block, maybe you set aside an afternoon of the week where you really work on, photography, website listing, social media posts, all those things like at once, get in marketing mode, set aside that cluster, that time block slot for it, and write it down on your weekly plan, right? Writing it down, blocking it out there is going to keep you accountable to do it and follow through and stick to it. Now, you may get a request on Monday or Monday or Tuesday, you might get an email maybe from someone who does your social media posts for you and say, oh, I need content. You didn't send me things for this month. What do you want me to do? And you're going to have to, again, come back to like that executive thinking and say, I will get those to you by the end of the day, Thursday. I'm not going to drop what I'm doing right now because this is my bench time, right? So this is what you kind of have to talk yourself through in your head. Like, yes, I got the email or I got the DM just now, but I'm not going to like switch to that. I have time set aside for it on Thursday. I'm going to just set the expectation with this person that they're going to hear back from me by the end of Thursday. And once you answer them and just say that, that's it, that's done. And then you get it done in your marketing block and it doesn't throw off your whole day. So as long as you're kind of staying disciplined and on top of these things, that becomes easier and easier to do. Okay. So we talked a little bit about that Friday time slot. And if it works better for you on a different day of the week, that's totally fine, whatever works for you. But just make sure you establish that, you write it down, and you put it as a recurring reminder on your phone and your calendar app. Because again, this is the sort of thing where one Friday things go sideways, you skip it. You're like, oh, I just didn't get to it this week, whatever. The next Friday, maybe that happens again. By the third Friday that you've skipped it, you're totally out of the habit. So this is when those recurring reminders on your calendar app can kind of save your bacon, right? Because at least they'll pester you and be like, this was working for you when you did it back in January and February. You need to get back on it. So those reminders are a helpful tool, right? They're the little angel on your shoulder. Okay. So we've talked about annual, monthly, weekly. Now we want to really talk about what happens when you go spinning out of control. When you get to that place where you're saying, I don't have time for that. I can't deal with that right now again, right? And as a small business owner, we'll get there. I've been doing this for 20 years. I get there all the time. And this is exactly what I do. I get out my tools. I literally use these, you guys, and I've used them for decades. Like, this saves my butt over and over again. I start feeling really, really stressed. I get these things out. I kind of take a look and I'm like, okay, I got to get disciplined. I got to look at where I've been spending my time. I got to really get back to using my weekly schedule and not just like switching between things and getting derailed by every email that comes into my inbox. I got to get back on track. So I keep these tools in soft copies on my computer. I go back to them, I update them. I literally print them out because I'm that kind of girl. And I literally have them on my desk right here in front of my monitor. And I get kind of back into it. So once I stick to that for a few weeks, it gets easier. And then I always start feeling better. I really do. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm back on my game. I'm back in control. I can do this. So it really does work. Really, really does work. Okay, shout out to calendar apps. You can share your favorites in the comments. Now these are usually on our phone, right? I'm a slave to my Outlook, but you know, there are a million of them out there and they all have pretty much the same features. I think it really helps to use like color coding for different reminders, delayed delivery. Like, I send myself little notes and I schedule them to pop up on my phone a week or two later. When I know I won't think of something or I can't write it down right then, I use those reminder alerts on my phone a lot to kind of keep my future self on track. So this is a tremendous time management tool. If you haven't really dug into what calendar apps can do for you, I encourage you to Google your particular calendar software. And just, there's a ton of stuff out there on how to use all the features, how to really get the most out of it. All right, so things in your toolbox that you are walking away with today, right? You've got your time assessment quiz to kind of be honest with yourself about when you're most productive. You've got your annual plan worksheet to think about those annual cycles in jewelry and in your year. We've got routine tasks, and that's what you're going to use to identify these time blocks where you can really kind of dig into a general area of the business and be most productive. You've got your weekly plan. That's one of the things that I would recommend you print out and keep on your desk. That's the hardest thing to be disciplined about and start those habits. But if you do it for a few weeks, you kind of feel yourself step into it. And then just making sure you're using your calendar app, or if you're unhappy with what you're using now, you know, this is a good time to switch and try something new. So we want to recap a little bit some of the key ideas we talked about today. You can be writing questions in the chat right now for Ashley to pass to me. We're wrapping up. Time is a resource, just like the silver at your workbench. So start thinking about it that way. Your time matters. You're a business owner. You got to get smart about how you use it. You also have to be realistic about decision fatigue. Notice that I never told you you can take a pill and get rid of it, right? There is no eliminating decision fatigue. We all hit it, totally normal. You just have to be honest about when this gets you and make sure that you're not trying to accomplish your hardest tasks in those time zones. Think about mental energy. And when you catch yourself saying, I don't have time for that, then realize like, I'm done. My mental energy is gone. And that's okay. But again, we just have to be responsive to that in the way we schedule our time. Use habits and plans. This is tough. I know this is a new skill. It takes practice, but you can do it. So if you get off track, just get back on that train. You can do it. So use discipline to kind of keep cycling back. And I think what you'll find, like I said before, like a few times you'll get off track and you'll get back on this plan and you'll see that it works. And that's the most motivating thing, right? Is when you see something is helping. Make sure you set aside that weekly planning time and you cut yourself some slack. When you got to regroup, that's okay. Just get out your tools again, hit the reset button, and you're going to be just fine. We all go off the rails sometimes. All right, so you guys did it. You made it. You survived time management. Such a fun topic, right? I hear you. Okay, so while you're finishing up on questions, just a quick reminder, please check out Halstead and do some shopping with us after the event this week. I hope you've been adding some items to cart as you've been watching demos and exploring what we have to offer. And I really want to thank all of our sponsors. This is a big resource lift for a company our size. Putting on this event is a really big deal for us. These sponsors help us cover the financial costs of this. And we are super grateful to them. So it is because of these sponsors that we are able to do this event. So please take the time to check them out and patronize them if it makes sense for you and your business. We are super appreciative of what they bring, not just to JBF, but to the jewelry field. Like we work with these people for a reason. These are good folks. All right, so I'm going to stop screen share. Ashley can come back in and let's talk about questions.
There we go. Okay, so there were only a couple in there so far. So if you guys think of some as we're talking, go ahead and throw them in there still. Someone was asking, do you or does anyone in the chat have a planner, perhaps industry specific or for general small business startups that you kind of use? There's a lot of options out there, so kind of looking for some recommendations.
Yeah, and Ashley, if you can put in, I know we have a couple of blogs on like some of the major events on the jewelry calendar in terms of like trade shows and things like that. There are some lists of like industry trade shows out there. So maybe if you're just starting to show, that's something you can refer to. I wouldn't say that there's an industry specific app for calendar, but there are definitely like these event lists out there in terms of trade shows and seasonality. But people can definitely chime in the chat here. I would say what we see seasonally is there's a big ramp up like for both Mother's Day, like from late April through May, that Mother's Day time. And it's also when people are really preparing for like summer shows. So summer craft shows, summer trade shows, that's like a really intense season in the business for a lot of people. And then of course, holiday, right? So late October all the way through the end of Christmas, those are some pretty intense times. You see some other little, peaks depending on the specifics of your business. Some jewelers see a lot of activity around Valentine's Day and for bridal, like in May and June as well, when you're getting into wedding season. So yeah, definitely chime in with your thoughts, everybody, on some of the things that some of the newbies in jewelry may not be aware of. Like once you go through 1 year and then definitely your second year in the jewelry business, you really feel this rhythm. It's very, very strong and recognizable in this particular field.
So there's a few people in here recommending apparently Silent Goddess on Instagram. So it's just at Silent Goddess, has a jewelry specific planner.
Cool, and that's good to know.
So definitely check that out if that's something you're interested in. I know I saw a couple Asana in here and Passion Planner. So those are some options to look out as well. Okay, and there was another question on, so is it advantageous for jewelry artists to kind of shift the work schedule to include weekends as opposed to the traditional Monday through Friday, since a lot of their demographic is working and not really shopping at that time?
It can be, but I also don't think there is a general expectation that you be answering business emails on Saturdays and Sundays. So again, when you think of your time as a resource, don't be a slave to those like DMs and emails. If Saturday is your weekend, like turn it off. You can answer it on Monday. You're not going to lose a sale because you don't answer somebody on a Saturday or a Sunday. So I don't want you to feel like you have to always be doing that. It's not required. And, Kelly really got into this in her session on Get Your Shit Together in terms of like setting the expectations. So as long as you have it on your website or your social media, like these are my business hours. I work these days. And if that's Monday to Friday, great. But it can also be, Tuesday to Saturday if that works for you and your family better. So it's just a matter of communicating that to your audience on your website and social. And then saying, it usually takes me one business day to respond to inquiries. And then people just know that when they post it and they're going to be fine with it. So don't sweat that kind of thing.
Awesome. And then a question came in, for multiple big goals for the year, do you recommend tackling them in chunks all at once or focus on one at a time?
I think that just really depends on you. And this is a place where an individual mentor or business advisor can help. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to share SBDCs and SCORE mentors with all of you. Because if you establish that relationship, that person can really help you with accountability and plotting a course, because your goals are going to change each year. You know, sometimes it really makes sense to tackle them one at a time sequentially, and other times you have to bounce back and forth between them, maybe because you're waiting for a conference or a class you want to take, and that doesn't happen until July, you know. So much of this depends on a case-by-case basis. There's no one way. But the really important thing is to write them down, to set those time blocks now, that you're going to set aside to work on them. And then you can decide like which ones in what order, or if you want to kind of work on them all kind of in parallel, that's up to you.
Okay, let's see here. Shauna says, I was asking because I'm curious if you can make the same sales in 2 days than you could in 1 week by working the weekend instead of the traditional work week, since you're hitting the market when no one else is.
I don't think it's that granular in terms of time, right? So I haven't seen that be the case. People can chime in if they have a different experience. But again, if you're on e-commerce, and I'm making an assumption here that you're talking about sales through a website or Instagram or one of these other online channels, there is not generally an expectation of immediate response. And even a lot of the biggest brands out there, there is no, shipping or customer service response on Sundays. So I don't know that they're missing sales. I don't think that's the case. So I think you can set your schedule according to your needs, and not worry about that too much.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, that's kind of all the questions that have come in. So we're gonna get ready for our social hour and giveaway wrap up. So join us in there for another $100 Halstead credit giveaway and learn more about our sponsors and some of the trends we're seeing right now. Thank you everyone so much for coming. We hope you got a lot out of it, and we'll see you in the wrap up. Thank you.
All right, see you there. Bye.
Bye.